My name is Simone, and at 32 years old, I thought I knew what rock bottom felt like. I was wrong. I stood in the hallway of my freezing Chicago home, reading a neon yellow sticky note my husband left on the refrigerator. It read, "Deal with this senile old woman. We are in Cabo for the week, so do not call unless it is an emergency. Just dump her in a state home if she gets too loud." I dropped my bags and ran up the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. I found his 85-year-old grandmother lying on the floor of the attic room in a pool of her own waste. She was blue from the cold and barely breathing. But as I reached for my phone to call 911, a red light in the corner of the room caught my eye. It was a camera, and it was recording. Before I tell you how a dying woman and I brought down an empire of lies, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Please like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight for someone who could not fight for themselves. The nightmare began 3 hours earlier at O'Hare International Airport. The pilot had announced we were landing in a blizzard, and the turbulence had been relentless. But it was nothing compared to the storm waiting for me on the ground. I had been gone for 3 days taking care of my parents in Detroit, who were recovering from a bad bout of the flu. My husband Dante had told everyone I was on a girls' trip. He liked to paint me as the irresponsible wife who abandoned her duties while he worked hard managing his investment fund. The truth was, I worked 60-hour weeks as a sous chef at one of the busiest restaurants in the Loop just to keep our bills paid while he played the part of the wealthy financier. I walked out of the terminal, wrapping my coat tighter against the biting wind that is famous in Chicago. I pulled up the rideshare app and requested a car. A moment later, a notification popped up on my screen. Payment declined. I frowned and tried again. Declined. Insufficient funds. My stomach dropped. That account was supposed to have $3,000 in it for emergencies and household expenses. I checked my banking app and saw a balance of $4.12. The transaction history showed a charge from yesterday for the Ritz-Carlton in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. Dante had drained our joint account to go on vacation. I felt the bile rise in my throat. He had told me he was going on a business retreat in New York. He had lied about the location and he had stolen my paycheck to fund it. I had to use my emergency cash hidden in the lining of my purse to pay a cab driver who looked at me with pity as I counted out the crumpled bills. The drive to the historic Greystone house in Bronzeville took an hour through the snow. This house belonged to Dante's grandmother, Nana Rose. She had let us move in 2 years ago when Dante said we needed to save money to buy our own place. Now he treated it like his personal palace and treated Nana like an unwanted guest in her own home. When the cab pulled up, the house was completely dark. Not a single light was on. The driveway had not been shoveled, and the snow was piled high against the front door. I dragged my suitcase through the drifts, my boots sinking into the wet slush. As soon as I unlocked the door, the cold hit me. It was colder inside than it was outside. I could see my breath puffing out in white clouds in the foyer. I ran to the thermostat in the hallway. It was blank. Dead. The power to the furnace had been cut, or the smart system had been turned off remotely. I knew Dante loved to control the house settings from his phone, usually to mess with me, but this was dangerous. It was 5 degrees below zero outside. I called out for Nana Rose, but the silence in the house was heavy and oppressive. It was the kind of silence that screams that something is wrong. I went to the kitchen first, hoping to find her sitting by the radiator with her tea. The kitchen was empty. On the stainless steel refrigerator that I kept spotless, the bright yellow notes seemed to glow in the gloom. I read Dante's handwriting and felt a mixture of rage and terror I had never experienced before. Deal with this senile old woman. We are in Cabo. Do not ruin my mother's vacation. He had left her. He had taken his mother Beatrice and his brother Jamal, and they had all gone to Mexico, leaving an 85-year-old woman alone in a blizzard with no heat. I dropped my purse and sprinted for the stairs. Nana Rose's room was on the top floor, a converted attic space that Ashley, my sister-in-law, had insisted was the best spot for her because it was quiet. In reality, it was the furthest point from the living room, so they did not have to look at her. The smell hit me before I even reached the landing. It was the smell of sickness, of unwashed bodies and rotting food. I pushed the door open and gasped. The room was freezing. The window had been cracked open just an inch, but in this weather that was enough to turn the room into an icebox. Nana Rose was not in her bed. She was curled up on the rug in the center of the room, wrapped in a thin blanket that was stained and dirty. "Nana," I screamed, rushing to her side. I fell to my knees on the hard floor. Her skin was waxy and pale, her lips a terrifying shade of blue. She was shivering so violently that her teeth were chattering, but her eyes were closed. I touched her cheek, and it felt like marble. She was suffering from severe hypothermia. I checked her pulse. It was faint, thready, and slow. Around her on the floor were styrofoam takeout containers. I opened one and saw moldy pasta. I opened another and saw a half-eaten burger that was rock hard. This was what Ashley called taking care of her. They had thrown food at her like she was a dog and left it there to rot when she was too weak to eat it. I pulled her into my arms, trying to share my body warmth. She was so light. She had lost so much weight in just the 3 days I was gone. How was this possible? I had meal prepped for her. I had left the fridge full of healthy food labeled with days and times. I looked over at the nightstand. The food I had prepared was gone. In its place were empty bottles of champagne and wrappers from expensive chocolates. They had eaten her food. They had a party before they left, and they had eaten the meals I made for a diabetic elderly woman. I fumbled for my phone to call for an ambulance, my fingers numb from the cold. As I dialed, I looked around the room, trying to find something warm to cover her with. That was when I saw it. Sitting on top of the dresser was a small ring light on a tripod. A smartphone was mounted in the center, and the red recording light was blinking steadily. It was pointed directly at the spot on the floor where Nana lay dying. I recognized the phone case. It was pink with glitter. It belonged to Ashley. My sister-in-law was a lifestyle influencer, a woman who built a following of 50,000 people by posting about her perfect life and her charity work. She loved to use hashtags like Black Excellence and Family First. I stood up gently, laying Nana back down for a second, and walked over to the phone. The screen was active. It was not just recording, it was live streaming to a private server. I looked at the caption running across the bottom of the screen. It read, "The reality of caring for the elderly with dementia. Sometimes they just refuse to get into bed. Struggle is real. Hard caregiver life. Hashtag pray for us." She was framing this. She had set up the scene. She had opened the window to make the room cold. She had left the trash on the floor. She wanted Nana to look crazy and dirty. She wanted to document Nana's decline so that when she died, they could say they did everything they could, but she was just too difficult to manage. This was not just neglect. This was a setup. They wanted her dead so they could sell the house and claim the insurance money Dante was always talking about. I grabbed the phone and ended the stream. I did not delete the video. I saved it. I emailed it to myself. Then I turned back to Nana Rose. Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment I expected to see the cloudy confusion that had plagued her for the last few years. Dante and Beatrice always said she was gone, that her mind was mush. But the eyes that looked up at me were clear. They were sharp. They were furious. She reached out a trembling hand and gripped my wrist with a strength that shocked me. "Simone," she rasped, her voice sounding like grinding stones. "I am here, Nana," I sobbed, stripping off my coat to wrap around her. "The ambulance is coming. You are going to be okay." She shook her head just a fraction. "Listen to me," she whispered. "Do not let them take me to a home. I won't. I promised. I will never let them hurt you again." She pulled me closer, her lips right next to my ear. "They think I am stupid," she hissed. "They think I am a senile old woman who does not know what they are signing in my name. They think I am broke." She took a ragged breath, and for a second I thought she was gone, but then she spoke again. "Help me get up, Simone. I have a safe deposit box key hidden in my hair." I looked at her confused. "In her hair?" She pointed to the messy gray bun on top of her head. I reached in and felt something hard and metallic woven into her braids. I pulled it out. It was a small silver key. They have no idea who I really am, she said, and a small cold smile touched her lips. But they are about to find out. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. I looked at the key in my hand, then back at the woman I had spent 2 years cooking for and cleaning up after. I realized then that I did not know her either. The paramedics burst through the door a minute later, bringing noise and chaos into the freezing room. As they loaded her onto the stretcher, Nana Rose looked at me one last time. "Call Vance," she whispered. Vance. The name sounded familiar, but I could not place it. The lawyer, she clarified. Arthur Vance. Tell him Rose is ready to collect her debts. As the ambulance doors closed and the lights flashed against the snow, I stood in the driveway, shivering in my thin sweater. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from Dante. Hope you are handling things. Do not spend too much money on a funeral if she goes. We need that cash for the house renovation. I looked at the text. Then I looked at the key in my hand. I was not going to spend money on a funeral. I was going to spend it on a war. The emergency room at Northwestern Memorial was a chaotic blur of fluorescent lights and hushed accusations. I sat in a plastic chair, my hands still shaking, while a triage nurse eyed me with undisguised suspicion. To her, I looked like a negligent caregiver who had let an elderly woman freeze half to death. She asked pointed questions about why Nana was malnourished, why her hygiene had been neglected, and why I had waited so long to call. I wanted to scream that I had been gone for 3 days, that my sister-in-law was supposed to be watching her, but I knew excuses would sound like lies. My phone buzzed incessantly in my pocket. It was Dante. I stepped into the hallway to answer, needing to hear his voice, needing him to realize what he had done. Babe, finally, he said, the background noise of a mariachi band, nearly drowning him out. Did you handle the situation? Mom is stressing out. She says she can feel negative energy coming from the house. Negative energy. His grandmother was currently hooked up to warming blankets and IV fluids, fighting for her life, and his mother was worried about vibes. She is in the hospital, Dante, I said, my voice dangerously low. She almost died. The house was 5 degrees. You turned off the heat. I turned it down to save money. He corrected, his tone dismissive. And she is fine. She is tough like an old leather boot. Look, just sign the paperwork to get her transferred to that state facility on the south side. I emailed you the forms. It is cheaper than home care. You want me to put her in a state home? I asked, gripping the phone tight enough to crack the screen. It is for her own good, Simone. She is confused. She does not know where she is half the time. Plus, we need her room. Ashley wants to turn it into a yoga studio. The line went dead before I could respond. He had hung up to order another margarita. I stood there staring at the phone, realizing that the man I had married was not just selfish. He was a monster. I walked back into the room just as Nana Rose was waking up. The doctors had stabilized her temperature, but they wanted to keep her for observation. When she saw me, she motioned for me to come closer. The fog that usually clouded her eyes was completely gone. In its place was a steely, terrifying intelligence. "Get me out of here," she commanded, her voice raspy but firm. "Nana, you need medical care," I whispered. "I need to not be here when Dante finds out I am alive," she retorted. "If he knows I am lucid, he will try to declare me incompetent before the week is out. He has power of attorney, Simone. Or he thinks he does. We need to leave. Now." I looked at the frail woman in the bed, then at the door where the suspicious nurse was standing guard. I made a choice. I used the last credit card I had, a secret one I kept for emergencies, with a $500 limit to pay the copay and sign her out against medical advice. I told the staff I was taking her to a private specialist. We did not go back to the Greystone mansion. That was the first place Dante would look, and I knew Ashley had cameras everywhere now. Instead, I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address of my old studio apartment in Pilsen. I had kept it even after marrying Dante, paying the rent with my tips from the restaurant. It was my escape hatch, a tiny, drafty box that smelled of old books and spices, but it was mine. Getting Nana up the 2 flights of stairs took 20 minutes. She was weak, but she refused to be carried. When we finally got inside, she sat on my lumpy thrift store sofa and looked around. It is small, she observed, pulling her shawl tighter, but it is clean, and it does not smell like Ashley's cheap perfume. I went to the kitchenette to make tea, my mind racing. What do we do now? I asked, my hands trembling as I poured the water. They are going to come back. They are going to throw me out. I have nowhere to go, Nana. Dante drained our accounts. Nana Rose chuckled. It was a dry, dusty sound. He drained your accounts, Simone. He did not touch mine. Because he cannot find them. She reached into her bra and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. It was old, yellowed with age. Do you know why Beatrice hates me? She asked, taking the tea I offered. Because you are difficult, I suggested gently. She laughed again. Because I am rich. And I do not mean rich like Dante with his leased BMW and his maxed-out credit cards. I mean wealthy. She handed me the paper. It was a copy of a business license from 1982. The name on it was Rose Roots Inc. I stared at it. Rose Roots, the hair care brand. The same one, she nodded. I invented the formula in my kitchen in Bronzeville before you were born. We were the first to market natural hair products for Black women in Chicago, when everyone else was pushing relaxers. I sold the distribution rights in '95 for $12 million. My jaw dropped. $12 million. I reinvested it, she continued, her eyes gleaming. Commercial real estate. I own 3 blocks in the Loop. I own the building Dante's office is in. He pays rent to a shell company I control, and he does not even know it. I sat down on the floor, the room spinning. But why? Why live in the attic? Why let them treat you like garbage? Why eat moldy leftovers? Because I needed to know, she said, her voice turning hard as diamond. I needed to know if they loved me or if they just loved the checkbook. When my husband died 5 years ago, I pretended the grief broke my mind. I played the senile old woman, and I watched. I watched Beatrice teach her sons that money was God. I watched Dante turn into a thief. I watched that white girl Ashley mock our culture while trying to profit off my misery. She leaned forward, grabbing my hand. And I watched you. I watched you cook for me when you were tired. I watched you wash my sheets when I pretended to have accidents. You are the only one who treated me like a human being when you thought I had nothing to offer. Tears pricked my eyes. I thought you were sick, Nana. I am sick, she admitted, her shoulders slumping slightly. My heart is failing, Simone. I have 6 months, maybe a year. But that is enough time. Enough time for what? To burn it all down, she whispered. She instructed me to go to the bank the next morning. Not the branch Dante used, but a private bank downtown. She gave me the key from her hair and a code word. When I opened the safe deposit box the next day, I expected to find cash. Instead, I found a mountain of evidence. There were ledgers detailing Dante's investments. I sat in the private viewing room and flipped through them. It wasn't just that he was bad with money. He was a criminal. He was running a Ponzi scheme. He was taking money from investors, friends, church members, even his own mother's friends, and using it to pay off earlier investors while skimming off the top to fund his lifestyle. The trip to Cabo paid for by the retirement fund of a deacon at our church. But the real smoking gun was a document at the bottom of the box. It was a power of attorney form signed by Dante, but it wasn't for Nana, it was a forgery. He had forged her signature on a document giving him control of a property she had sold 10 years ago. He was using a dead asset to leverage loans. I took the documents back to the apartment. Nana was sitting by the window watching the snow fall. You found it? She asked without turning around. He is going to prison, I said, my voice hollow. If this gets out, he goes to jail for a long time. Good, she said. But prison is too easy. I want him destroyed first. I want him to lose his reputation, his friends, his arrogance. I want Ashley to lose her followers. I want Beatrice to know she raised a failure. She turned to me, her eyes blazing. I have a plan, Simone. But I cannot do it alone. I need legs. I need a voice. I need someone they underestimate. She slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside was a legal contract. It was drafted by Arthur Vance, the most feared civil rights attorney in Chicago. This appoints you as my sole conservator and the executor of my estate, she explained. It cuts them out, completely. Not a dime. But there is a catch. I read the clause she pointed to. It stated that I would only inherit the estate if I executed a specific series of actions designed to expose the fraud and abuse committed by the family. You want me to be your assassin, I said, looking up at her. I want you to be my justice, she corrected. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. Ashley had posted a new story. It was a picture of her and Dante on a yacht in Cabo holding champagne glasses. The caption read, "Sending prayers to the family back home. Grandma Rose is at peace now. We are trying to stay strong. At peace." They thought she was dead. They assumed I had let her die or put her in a home where she would fade away. They were celebrating her erasure. I looked at the photo, at Dante's smug smile, at the way Ashley's hand rested possessively on his chest, the chest of a man who stole from the elderly. I picked up the pen. "Where do I sign?" I asked. Nana Rose smiled, and for the first time I saw the shark beneath the grandmotherly facade. "Welcome to the family business, Simone. Now call Vance. We have a dinner party to plan." The silence of the house was shattered 3 days later by the sound of a key turning in the lock and the loud, boisterous laughter of people who had not a care in the world. I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for a stew I had no intention of eating when the front door swung open. A gust of cold wind followed them in, but they brought their own heat. They smelled of coconut oil, expensive tequila, and the stale air of an airplane cabin. Dante walked in first, his skin a deep bronze that made his teeth look whiter when he smiled. But he was not smiling at me. He was laughing at something Jamal had said. He dropped his heavy leather carry-on bag right in the middle of the hallway, expecting it to be moved by invisible hands. Beatrice followed him, wearing a ridiculous straw hat that was far too large for a Chicago winter, and a white linen caftan that looked absurd against the gray backdrop of the snow outside. Ashley brought up the rear, her face buried in her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen, probably uploading the final highlights of their trip. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped out of the kitchen. I made sure my shoulders were hunched, my head lowered. I had to look beaten. I had to look like the wife who had failed. "Welcome home," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Dante looked at me like I was a piece of furniture that had been moved to the wrong spot. "You are still here," he said flatly. "I thought you would be at work." "I took a few days off." I lied. "To handle things." Beatrice pushed past me, not even acknowledging my presence. Her eyes immediately darted up the staircase toward the attic. "Is it done?" she asked, her voice sharp and devoid of any warmth. "Is the house empty?" I nodded, keeping my eyes on the floor. "Good," she huffed. "That room needs to be fumigated." The smell of old age was seeping into the floorboards. She started up the stairs, her heels clicking loudly on the wood. Dante and Ashley followed her, leaving me standing alone with the luggage. I waited a beat, then followed them, my heart pounding a rhythm of pure adrenaline against my ribs. When we reached the attic room, the door was wide open. The room was stripped bare. I had spent the last 2 days moving everything of value to my apartment. The photos, the old records, the handmade quilts Nana loved. All that remained was the metal bed frame and the dresser. Beatrice stood in the center of the room, spinning slowly in a circle. She let out a dramatic wail that sounded more like a siren than a sob. "Oh, my poor mother," she cried, pressing a hand to her chest. "To think it ended like this." I watched her from the doorway, There were no tears in her eyes. Not a single drop. Her gaze was not on the empty bed where her mother had slept. It was fixed on the vintage jewelry box that sat on the dresser. It was the only thing I had left behind intentionally. It was empty, of course, but Beatrice did not know that yet. She rushed over to it, her hands trembling not with grief but with greed. She opened the lid expecting to see the pearl necklace and the diamond brooches Nana had worn in the 60s. When she saw the velvet lining was bare, her face twisted into a snarl for a split second before she remembered her audience. She clapped the box shut and turned to us, her face rearranging itself into a mask of tragic suffering. "She must have lost them," she said, shaking her head. Her mind was so gone at the end. She probably threw them away or hid them. My poor inheritance. Ashley did not even look up from the jewelry box. She had found the perfect lighting near the window. She held her phone up high, angling her face to catch the gray winter light so it would make her look pale and somber. She snapped a selfie with the empty bed in the background, then immediately started typing. I stepped closer just enough to see her screen. She was posting to Instagram. The caption read, "Heaven gained the sweetest angel today. We did everything we could, but God needed her more. Rest in power, Nana Rose." The hashtags were even worse. Heartbroken. Family, first. Grandma's girl. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the doorframe. She had not spoken 2 words to Nana in a year, unless it was to complain about the noise her walker made. Now she was harvesting likes from her death. "So where is the body?" Dante asked, turning to me. He sounded bored, like he was asking where I had put the dry cleaning. I took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of fear and submission I could muster. "She is not dead yet," I said, my voice trembling. The room went silent. Beatrice stopped her fake crying mid-sob. Ashley looked up from her phone, her brow furrowed. "What do you mean she is not dead?" Dante demanded, taking a step toward me. His vacation glow seemed to vanish, replaced by the dark irritation I knew so well. I called the ambulance when I got home," I stammered, wringing my hands. "She was so cold, Dante. The heat was off. The paramedics said she was critical. They took her to the county hospital." "County?" Beatrice shrieked. "That place is a sewer. Why didn't you take her to a private facility?" "Because we have no money, Beatrice," I wanted to scream. "Because your son stole it all." But I bit my tongue. They said it was the only place that would take a ward of the state. I lied. I told them we couldn't pay." Dante ran a hand over his face, letting out a long, frustrated groan. "Great. Just great. So she is lingering. Is she conscious? Can she speak?" "No," I said quickly. "The doctor said she is in a coma. It is just a matter of time. A few days, maybe a week." Dante relaxed visibly. His shoulders dropped. Okay, that works. As long as she cannot talk, she cannot complicate things." He walked over to me, invading my personal space. He smelled of stale alcohol and expensive cologne. He looked down at me, his eyes cold and hard. "You need to go down there today," he ordered. "Stay with her. Make sure the doctors know we do not want any heroic measures, no resuscitation. If her heart stops, let it stop. We need this to be over, Simone." I nodded, looking at his shoes. "I understand. And the house paperwork," he continued, his voice dropping lower. "The buyer is pushing. I need you to sign the affidavit stating that you are her primary caregiver, and that you consent to the sale on her behalf since she is incapacitated." "But she is not dead yet," I whispered, playing the part of the morally conflicted wife. "She is as good as dead," he snapped. "Do not be stupid. We need that money to pay off the renovation loans. And the trip. Do you have any idea how much the Ritz cost? I did it for us, Simone. For our image." He turned away from me, dismissing me as if I were a servant. He walked over to the corner where his suitcase sat and kicked it toward me. It slid across the floor and hit my shin. "Unpack that," he said. "Everything smells like the airport. wash it all on hot, and get the stains out of my white linen suit. I spilled wine on it. He walked out of the room, pulling his phone from his pocket, probably to call his investors and tell them the money was coming soon. Beatrice followed him, still clutching the empty jewelry box, muttering about how she needed a nap after such a stressful flight. Ashley gave me a blank look and followed them, leaving me alone in the empty room that had been Nana's prison. I looked at the phone in my hand. I had recorded the entire conversation, every word about letting her die, every word about the money, every lie. I picked up Dante's heavy suitcase. It weighed a ton, stuffed with the evidence of a life he could not afford. I dragged it down the 2 flights of stairs to the laundry room in the basement. The basement was cold and smelled of detergent and damp concrete. I hoisted the bag onto the sorting table and unzipped it. A pile of dirty clothes spilled out. Bright floral shirts, swim trunks that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, and linen pants stained with red wine and grease. I started sorting them, throwing the whites into one pile and the colors into another. My hands were moving automatically, but my mind was racing. I needed to get the affidavit to Vance. I needed to get back to Nana. I needed to keep playing this game until the trap was snapped shut. I reached into the main compartment of the suitcase to grab a handful of socks, and that was when I felt something silky. I pulled it out. It was a pair of underwear. Not boxer briefs, not the cotton ones Dante wore. It was a thong, bright red lace, tiny, expensive. I held it up to the light. It was a size extra small. I am a size medium. I wear practical cotton or sensible blends because I am on my feet all day in a hot kitchen. I have never owned red lace in my life. I looked closer. There was a small monogram stitched into the waistband in gold thread. The letters were K. K. I felt a cold numbness spread through my chest. It wasn't heartbreak. I think my heart had broken a long time ago. This was clarity. Dante hadn't just gone to Cabo with his mother and brother. He had taken someone else. He had taken a woman who wore size extra small red lace underwear and had the initials KK. I remembered the conversation I had recorded earlier. Dante telling his friend on the phone I bought the ring for baby K. I dropped the underwear back onto the pile of dirty laundry. A grim smile spread across my face. He was cheating. Of course he was. He was stealing from his grandmother, running a Ponzi scheme, and cheating on his wife, all while pretending to be the pillar of the community. I picked up the red lace again. I didn't wash it. I didn't throw it away. I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. This wasn't just laundry. This was ammunition. And I was going to use every single bullet. The black dress Dante threw at me was 2 sizes too big and made of cheap, scratchy polyester. It came with a white apron that looked like something out of a bad costume shop. "Put this on," he said, not even looking up from the mirror where he was adjusting his silk tie. "We have high-profile investors coming tonight, the Carters and Mr. Sterling. I do not want them confused about who runs this house. If they know the help is my wife, it looks low rent. Just pour the wine and keep your mouth shut." I stood in the bathroom staring at myself in the mirror. I looked like a caricature. I was a sous chef at a Michelin star-rated restaurant. I managed a kitchen staff of 20. I created menus that food critics raved about. But in this house, to this man, I was nothing more than a servant. I thought about throwing the apron in the trash. I thought about walking out the door and never coming back. But then I felt the weight of the small black listening device in my pocket. Nana Rose had given it to me that morning, along with a hug that felt like armor. I put on the apron. I tied the strings tight. I slicked my hair back into a severe bun just like Dante liked. I was not dressing for dinner. I was dressing for war. The guests arrived at 7 o'clock sharp. The Sterlings were an older white couple with old money written all over their bored expressions. The Carters were part of the Chicago black elite, the kind of people who looked at my address in Bronzeville and wrinkled their noses. Dante greeted them with a glass of champagne in each hand, playing the role of the successful hedge fund manager to perfection. Ashley was right beside him, wearing a white dress that looked suspiciously like a bridal gown, acting the part of the gracious hostess as if she owned the place. I walked out with the tray of hors d'oeuvres. I had spent 4 hours making them. Truffle arancini, smoked salmon blinis, miniature beef Wellingtons. They were perfect. Dante did not introduce me, he just snapped his fingers. Service, he barked, pointing to Mr. Sterling's empty glass. I moved around the room, filling glasses, offering food, making myself invisible. I felt their eyes slide over me, dismissing me. To them, I was just part of the furniture. We sat down for dinner in the formal dining room. I had set the table with Nana's good china, the plates Beatrice had been too lazy to pack away. Dante sat at the head of the table looking like a king. I brought out the main course, braised short ribs with a polenta reduction. It smelled divine. Ashley took one look at her plate and let out a small tinkling laugh. "Oh, Simone," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "This looks heavy." You know Simone cooks that real soul food. It is very traditional. Lots of grease, lots of butter. It is delicious if you have the stomach for it, but I usually prefer something a little more refined. The table went quiet, Mrs. Sterling looked at her food with mild alarm. Beatrice chuckled, sipping her wine. "You have to forgive her," she said, waving a hand at me. "She cooks with what she knows. It is comfort food. Very rustic." I stood there, my hands gripping the serving tray so hard my knuckles turned white. They were weaponizing my heritage against me. They were taking my skill, my art, and reducing it to a stereotype, to make themselves feel superior. "I am sorry if it is not to your taste," I said, my voice flat. Dante shot me a look that promised punishment later. "Just get more wine," he hissed. I turned to go back to the kitchen, but as I turned, I pretended to stumble. The tray tipped, and a silver serving spoon clattered onto the hardwood floor, sliding under the massive mahogany table. "So clumsy," Ashley sighed, rolling her eyes. "I am so sorry," I apologized, dropping to my knees. I crawled under the table. The heavy tablecloth draped around me, creating a small dark tent. I could see their shoes. Dante's polished loafers. Ashley's red bottoms. I reached into my apron pocket. My fingers found the small black disc. It had an adhesive back. I peeled off the sticker and pressed it firmly against the underside of the table, right between Dante and Mr. Sterling. I grabbed the spoon and crawled back out. I hurried into the kitchen, my heart pounding against my ribs. I did not stop to wash the spoon. I went straight to the pantry where I had set up my laptop behind a stack of canned goods. I put on my headphones and opened the audio program. The sound was crystal clear. So Dante, Mr. Sterling's voice boomed. "This real estate portfolio, you say you have the deeds. Secured and locked away." Dante lied smoothly. "My grandmother left everything to me. She is in a facility now. Very sad. Dementia. She signed over full control last week. We are just waiting for the final processing to clear. The property value alone is worth $5 million. He was selling property he did not own. He was using Nana's buildings as collateral for a loan he would never pay back." Beatrice chimed in. "It is a burden, really, managing all of this. But Dante is so good with numbers. He is a visionary." I listened as the dinner wound down. I heard chairs scrape against the floor as the guests moved to the living room for brandy. Ashley and Beatrice went with them, their voices fading. But Dante stayed behind. I heard the clink of a bottle against a glass. Then another voice. It was Jamal, his brother. "You sure this is going to work?" Jamal asked, his voice low. "That Sterling guy asks a lot of questions." "He is greedy," Dante scoffed. "Greedy men do not look too close at the fine print. Once he signs the check, we cover the margin call on the crypto account, and we are clear." "And the wife?" Jamal asked. "Simone, she was looking at you weird tonight." Dante laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. "Simone is an idiot. She thinks we are broke because of the market. She has no idea I drained the joint savings account dry. I pressed the headphones closer to my ears, tears pricking my eyes. Where did the money go? Jamal asked. Dante lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I bought the ring, Jamal. 5 carats. Flawless. For baby K. Keisha is going to flip when she sees it. Keisha. KK. The initials on the underwear. But what about Simone? Jamal asked. You are still married, man. Not for long, Dante said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. The second the old lady kicks the bucket, I am listing this house. I already have the eviction papers drawn up for Simone. I am going to serve her at the funeral. She will be on the street before the dirt hits the casket. I took the headphones off. My hands were trembling, but my mind was ice cold. He was not just cheating. He was planning to discard me like trash. He was waiting for his grandmother to die so he could celebrate my homelessness. I looked at the recording on the screen. Saved. I wiped my face with the hem of the maid's apron. Then I stood up. I picked up the tray of dessert. Crème brûlée. I walked back out into the dining room where Dante and Jamal were still finishing their drinks. More wine, I asked, my voice steady and sweet. Dante looked at me, his eyes glazed with arrogance and alcohol. Yeah, he said. And clean up this mess. You missed a spot on the floor. I looked at the spot. Then I looked at him. I will get right on that, I said. I walked back to the kitchen. But I did not reach for the mop. I reached for my phone. I dialed a number I had memorized. Mr. Vance, I said, when the deep voice answered. It is Simone. I have the recording. He confessed to the fraud, and he confessed to the theft. Good, Arthur Vance said. Is the dinner over? Not yet, I said, watching Dante through the crack in the door. But the party is just getting started. I hung up. I took the red lace underwear out of my pocket and dropped it into the soup tureen that was going into the dishwasher. Let Ashley find that when she tried to play house tomorrow. I was done serving. It was time to start cooking. The Green Mill was a jazz club on Broadway that smelled of old bourbon and history. It was the kind of place where people went to disappear into the music or to make deals they did not want anyone else to see. I walked in, shaking the snow off my coat, and spotted Arthur Vance immediately. He was sitting in a corner booth wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than my car used to be worth. He looked like a man who knew where all the bodies were buried because he had probably drawn up the paperwork for the funerals. I slid into the booth across from him. He did not smile. He just pushed a glass of water toward me and placed a thick manila envelope on the table. You have the recording? He asked, his voice a low rumble that barely carried over the saxophone solo coming from the stage. I nodded and placed a flash drive on the table. He confessed to everything. The fraud, the theft, the plan to evict me. Vance pocketed the drive with a smooth, practiced motion. Good. That is the nail in the coffin. But you need to understand the urgency of the situation, Simone. Dante is not just a thief. He is a desperate man. He opened the envelope and spread out a series of photographs and bank statements. Your husband did not just lose money in the market, Vance said, pointing to a grainy photo of Dante shaking hands with a man who looked like he broke kneecaps for a living. He leveraged everything on a cryptocurrency scheme that collapsed 3 weeks ago. He borrowed $500,000 from the wrong people. I stared at the photo. 500,000. They gave him a deadline. Vance continued. He has 48 hours to pay up or they start taking collateral. And since he put the house up as a guarantee on a secondary loan, he forged Nana's signature on he needs to sell it immediately. That is why he needs her dead. He cannot sell the property while she is alive and holding the deed. He needs the inheritance to clear the debt before they come for him. My stomach turned over. It was not just greed, it was fear. He was going to kill his own grandmother to save his own skin from loan sharks. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from a burner number. Nana. Make them hungry, the text read. If they think there is more money, they will do anything you say. Dangle the carrot, Simone. I looked up at Vance. Nana says to make them hungrier. Vance smiled for the first time. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Rose always did know how to play the game. Here is what you are going to do. You are going to go back there and tell them you found out about a trust, a secret trust. Secret. Tell them it is worth millions, but tell them there is a stipulation. I leaned in listening as he outlined the lie. It was perfect. It was diabolical. I left the club feeling a strange sense of calm. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard purpose. I drove back to the Greystone rehearsing my lines. I had to be the terrified, confused wife one last time. When I walked into the house, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Dante was pacing the living room, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice a hushed, frantic whisper. Beatrice was sitting on the sofa angrily flipping through a magazine, while Ashley was in the kitchen loudly complaining that there was no organic almond milk. Dante hung up the phone when he saw me. "Where have you been?" he snapped. "You were supposed to be at the hospital waiting for the old lady to croak." I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump. I tried to make myself look small. "I was there, Dante," I said, my voice trembling just the right amount. But something happened. A lawyer came, a Mr. Sterling. Dante froze. "Sterling, the investor." "No," I said. "A different Sterling. He said he represents the Rose estate. He said he had to verify Nana's location because of the trust." Beatrice's head snapped up so fast I heard her neck crack. "What trust?" she demanded, standing up. "Mother didn't have a trust. She was broke." "That is what I thought too," I said, widening my eyes. "But this lawyer, he showed me papers, Beatrice. He said Nana Rose set up a legacy fund 30 years ago. He said it has been accumulating interest this whole time. He said it is worth, I think he said $10 million. $10 million. The number hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the room. Ashley poked her head out of the kitchen, her eyes wide. Dante looked like he had been punched in the gut. $10 million, he whispered. "And who gets it?" I swallowed hard, playing the part. "He said it goes to her primary caregiver and next of kin." "That would be you guys, right?" Dante let out a breath that sounded like a laugh. $10 million. That covers the debt. That covers everything. We are rich. We are actually rich." But I interrupted, raising my hand. "There is a problem." "What problem?" Beatrice snapped, moving closer to me. "The lawyer said there is a clause," I explained. "A morbidity clause. He said Nana was very specific. She wanted to die in her own home. He said if she dies in a state facility or a hospital, the money is donated to charity. It all goes to a cat shelter in Wisconsin." "A cat shelter?" Dante yelled. "Are you kidding me?" "That is what he said," I whimpered. "He said the trust only unlocks if she passes away peacefully in her family residence. He said he needs to verify her death certificate with the home address." Silence descended on the room as they processed this. I watched the gears turning in their heads. They needed her dead, but now they needed her dead here. They could not just let her rot in a county hospital. They had to bring her back. Beatrice was the first to move. She walked over to me, and for a second I thought she was going to hit me. Instead, she reached out and took my hands in hers. Her palms were damp and cold. "Simone," she said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet syrup that made my skin crawl. "You have done so well finding this out. You are such a good listener." She turned to Dante. "Go get the car. We need to go to the hospital." "Now," Dante asked. "It is late. We cannot risk her dying in that sewer," Beatrice hissed. "If she dies there, we lose the 10 million. We need to bring her home. Tonight." She looked back at me and smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "Simone, darling, you should prepare the room. Make it nice. We want Mother to be comfortable, don't we? We want her to have a beautiful, peaceful end." I nodded, keeping my face blank. "Yes, Beatrice, I will get the room ready." "Good girl," she said, patting my cheek. "You really are part of the family, aren't you? My sweet daughter." She had never called me that, not once in 5 years. She usually referred to me as that girl, or the help. Now that I was the key to $10 million, I was her sweet daughter. Dante grabbed his keys, his energy renewed. I will drive. Ashley, clear out the back seat. We are bringing Nana home. Ashley didn't even complain about the smell, she just grabbed her coat. Think of the content, she muttered to herself. Bringing Grandma home for hospice. The final journey. This is going to go viral. I watched them rush out the door, tripping over themselves in their haste to retrieve the woman they had left to freeze 3 days ago. They looked like vultures circling a carcass, only now they realized the carcass was made of gold. I waited until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Nana. They took the bait. They are coming to get you. A second later, a reply popped up. Good. Let them carry me up the stairs. I want to see them sweat. I walked into the kitchen and picked up the knife I had been using earlier. I washed it slowly, drying the blade. Beatrice wanted the room ready. She wanted a stage for a peaceful death. I would give them a stage, all right. But the play wasn't going to be a tragedy. It was going to be an execution. The return to the Greystone Mansion was a production worthy of Broadway, complete with lighting cues and costume changes. We brought Nana Rose home in the back of Dante's luxury SUV because he refused to pay for a private ambulance. I had spent an hour applying makeup to her face before we left the safe house, using a pale foundation to wash out her complexion and contouring her cheeks to make her look skeletal and wasted. She played her part perfectly, letting her head loll to the side and keeping her breathing shallow and ragged. When Dante carried her up the front steps, Beatrice stood in the doorway holding a handkerchief to her dry eyes, directing him to be careful with the precious cargo she had ignored for years. They laid her in the bed in the middle of the room, which Ashley had staged with fresh white linens and a vase of white lilies that smelled like a funeral home. The air was thick with performative grief. Beatrice hovered over the bed, smoothing the sheets and murmuring about how good it was to have Mother home where she belonged, while Dante paced the hallway, checking his watch every 30 seconds. He was vibrating with anxiety, terrified that she would die before the ink was dry on the paperwork, or worse, that she would live too long and the loan sharks would come collecting. Then the show really began. Ashley set up her ring light again, positioning it so the soft glow illuminated Nana's frail form without revealing the makeup. She pulled up a chair and a bowl of oatmeal I had made hours ago, which was now cold and congealed. I watched from the doorway as she hit record on her phone, her face instantly transforming into a mask of tragic bravery. "Hey guys," she whispered into the camera, her voice trembling. "We brought Nana home. The doctor said there is nothing more they can do, so we are just trying to make her comfortable for her final transition. It is so hard watching someone you love fade away, but we are blessed to be here with her. Hashtag hospice care, # final journey, # family love." She dipped the spoon into the cold glop and held it to Nana's closed lips. Nana did not move. Ashley held the pose for a solid 10 seconds, making sure the camera caught the tenderness of the gesture before pulling the spoon away and wiping a non-existent tear from her cheek. She did not actually feed her. She just performed the act of feeding her. Once the live stream ended, she dropped the spoon back into the bowl with a clatter and checked her engagement metrics, muttering about how the algorithm was finally picking up her content. While Ashley was busy exploiting a dying woman for internet clout, Dante and Jamal were tearing the room apart. They thought I could not see them, but I was watching their reflections in the mirror above the dresser. They were looking for the key. They knew Nana kept a safe deposit box key somewhere, and they were convinced it was in this room. They pulled out drawers, checked under the mattress, and ran their hands along the tops of the door frames. I stood silently in the corner, my hands folded in front of me, fighting the urge to smile. They would never find it. I had replaced the lock on the small personal safe in the closet 2 days ago, and the key they were looking for was currently taped to the inside of my thigh. I watched Dante's frustration mount as he came up empty-handed again and again. He shot a look of pure venom at Nana's sleeping form, as if her refusal to give up her secrets was a personal insult to him. Dante whispered to Jamal, his voice tight with panic. "We need that key. The deed has to be in the box. If we do not get it by tomorrow morning, the deal falls through and we are dead." "Keep looking," Jamal hissed back. "It has to be here. Old people hide things in weird places. Check her shoes. Check the lining of her coats." I left them to their futile scavenger hunt and went downstairs to get a glass of water. When I came back up 10 minutes later, the hallway was empty. Dante and Jamal had moved their search to the study, convinced that maybe she had hidden it there. Beatrice had retired to her room, claiming a migraine brought on by the stress of being such a devoted daughter. That left Ashley alone in the room with Nana. She was sitting in the armchair, scrolling through her phone, probably deleting negative comments. Nana was still perfectly motionless in the bed. I stayed in the shadows of the hallway watching. Suddenly, Nana took a deep, rattling breath. Ashley jumped, looking up from her phone. She stared at the bed, her eyes wide. Nana's head turned slowly on the pillow. Her eyelids fluttered and then snapped open. She did not look at the ceiling. She looked directly at Ashley. Her eyes were not cloudy or confused. They were sharp, clear, and burning with a terrifying intensity. She fixed Ashley with a glare that could have stripped paint off the walls. Ashley froze. She dropped her phone on her lap. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Then, just as quickly as it had happened, Nana's eyes closed and her head rolled back to its original position. She let out a long, soft sigh and went still. Ashley scrambled out of the chair, backing away until she hit the wall. She was hyperventilating, clutching her chest. I stepped into the room, acting concerned. "Ashley, are you okay?" I asked, my voice full of fake worry. She looked at me, her face pale and sweaty. She looked at me?" Ashley stammered, pointing a shaking finger at the bed. "She opened her eyes, Simone. She looked right at me like she knew who I was. Like she hated me." I walked over to the bed and checked Nana's pulse. It was steady and slow. I smoothed her hair back. "She is in a coma, Ashley," I said gently. "She cannot open her eyes. It was probably just a muscle spasm. Or maybe—" "Are you still taking those diet pills from Mexico?" Ashley blinked, confused. "The ones Dante got me." "Yeah, why?" "I have heard they can cause hallucinations," I said, shaking my head sadly. "Especially when you are under a lot of stress. You should probably go lie down. You are seeing things." Ashley looked at the bed one last time, terror warring with confusion in her eyes. "Yeah," she whispered. "Yeah, maybe you are right. Hallucinations. That has to be it. Because for a second—" She did not finish the sentence. She grabbed her phone and fled the room, running from the judgment she thought she had imagined. I patted Nana's hand and felt a faint squeeze in return. An hour later, Dante found me in the kitchen. I was boiling water for tea. He walked in holding a thick stack of paperwork. He looked exhausted and desperate, the dark circles under his eyes standing out against his vacation tan. "The nurse is coming in the morning to evaluate her for hospice care," he said, placing the stack on the counter. "We need to get these forms signed tonight. It is just standard medical stuff. Power of attorney transfer, consent for palliative care, insurance updates. I need you to sign as the witness and primary caregiver, since you have been the one dealing with her doctors." He fanned the papers out, pointing to the signature lines, marked with little sticky flags. "Just sign here, here, and here. We need to get this filed so the insurance kicks in." I looked at the papers. The top few pages were indeed medical forms, standard boilerplate stuff, but I noticed the paper thickness changed halfway through the stack. The bottom pages were on a slightly heavier bond, the kind used for legal decrees. He was trying to slip something past me. I picked up a pen, my hand trembling just enough to sell the act of the overwhelmed grieving wife. "Okay, Dante," I said, sniffing. "Anything to help Nana." I signed the first page, then the second. As I turned to the third page, I let my elbow knock into the mug of tea sitting next to me. "Oh no!" I cried, as hot water splashed across the counter. Dante jumped back, cursing as the liquid dripped onto his expensive shoes. "You clumsy idiot!" he shouted, grabbing a towel. "Watch what you are doing." While he was bent down, wiping his shoes, I moved with a speed born of pure adrenaline. I reached into the pocket of my apron and pulled out a single sheet of paper I had been carrying all day. It was identical in weight and texture to the legal forms Dante was hiding. I slid his document out from the bottom of the stack. I caught a glimpse of the header "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage and Waiver of Assets" and shoved it into my waistband. In its place, I slipped my document in face up so only the signature line was visible. The document I inserted was titled, "Affidavit of Confession Regarding Financial Fraud and Intent to Do Bodily Harm." It laid out everything: the Ponzi scheme, the plan to let Nana die, the theft of my savings. Dante stood up, throwing the wet towel into the sink. "Just sign the damn papers, Simone. I do not have time for this." "I am sorry," I whimpered. "I am just so upset." I looked at the page I had just swapped in. I signed my name on the witness line. Then I pushed the stack toward him. "You need to sign too," I said, pointing to the line next to mine. "As the executor." Dante didn't even look at the text. He was too busy checking his phone, probably getting another threatening text from his loan shark. He grabbed the pen and scribbled his signature right below mine, sealing his own fate. "There," he said, snatching the papers up. "Done. Now go check on the old lady. If she is still breathing in the morning, we are going to have to increase the morphine." He walked out of the kitchen, clutching the evidence of his own guilt to his chest, thinking he had just tricked me into divorcing him with nothing. I watched him go, my heart hammering a victory rhythm against my ribs. I pulled the divorce papers out of my waistband and threw them into the trash compactor. He thought he was playing chess. He did not realize I had already flipped the board. The morning sun was just beginning to cut through the gray Chicago clouds when I found the receipt that would tear Dante's world apart. He was still asleep upstairs, passed out from the stress of his financial juggling act and the bottle of scotch he had consumed the night before. I was going through the pockets of his suit jacket, the charcoal gray one he had worn to the dinner party. I told myself I was looking for dry cleaning tags, but I was hunting for secrets. My fingers brushed against a crumpled piece of thermal paper deep in the inside pocket. I pulled it out and smoothed it against the kitchen counter. It was from Le Bijou, one of the most exclusive jewelers on the Magnificent Mile. The date was 3 days ago, the same day he had drained our joint savings account. The total at the bottom made the breath catch in my throat. $50,000. I stared at the item description. 5-carat pear-shaped diamond, platinum setting. Custom engraving for baby K. $50,000. That was my overtime pay. That was the money for the roof repair on Nana's house. That was the safety net he had stolen from me to put on the finger of another woman. I did not scream. I did not cry. I folded the receipt and put it in my purse. Then I grabbed my coat and keys. I had an errand to run. The drive downtown took 40 minutes in the morning traffic. I parked my rusted 10-year-old sedan a block away from Michigan Avenue, not wanting the valet at the jewelry store to sneer at it. I walked into Le Bijou wearing my winter coat and sensible boots, looking nothing like their usual clientele. The security guard eyed me suspiciously, and a sales associate with a tight bun and a tighter smile approached me, with a look that said, "You cannot afford anything here." "Can I help you, miss?" she asked, blocking my path to the display cases. I pulled the receipt out of my pocket and held it up. "I am Mrs. Dante Williams. My husband made a purchase here 3 days ago. There seems to be a discrepancy with the insurance valuation on our policy. I need to verify the serial number on the diamond." The sales associate's smile faltered. "Oh, Mrs. Williams. I apologize. Let me pull up the transaction." She went to the computer, tapping her manicured nails on the keyboard. I watched her screen reflection in the mirror behind her. "I see the purchase here," she said, "but Mr. Williams picked it up in person." The certificate of authenticity was in the box. "I know," I said, stepping closer, my voice dropping to a confidential whisper. But my husband is a very busy man. He can be forgetful. He told me he came in alone, but I suspect he might have had his assistant with him. She handles the insurance. I just need to know if she signed for anything." The clerk looked uncomfortable. "We do have a policy about client privacy." I leaned in, placing my hand on the counter. My hand that was still wearing a simple gold band, not a $50,000 rock. "Look, this was purchased with a joint account. Legally, I am the owner of that ring just as much as he is. If I have to come back with a subpoena for your security footage to prove who walked out with my property, I will. And I will make sure to mention to your manager how unhelpful you were." Fear flickered in her eyes. Rich men's wives were dangerous, but scorned wives were lethal. She glanced at the security guard, then back at me. "I can show you the time-stamped footage from the pickup," she whispered, "just to verify the signatory." She turned the monitor toward me. The video was high definition. I saw Dante standing at the counter looking more excited than I had seen him in years. But he was not alone. Hanging off his arm was a woman. She was tall, stunningly beautiful, and wearing a white fur coat that probably cost more than my salary. I recognized her immediately. Everyone in Chicago with an Instagram account knew who she was. Keisha Knight, a fashion influencer with 2 million followers. She was famous for her luxury lifestyle hauls and her messy public feuds with other bloggers. I watched as Dante slipped the ring onto her finger. She squealed and kissed him full on the mouth right there in the store. He slapped her backside playfully as they walked out. "Baby K, Keisha Knight." I took a picture of the screen with my phone. "Thank you," I said to the terrified clerk. "That is all I needed to know." I drove back to the Greystone, my mind racing. Dante wasn't just cheating. He was cheating with someone high profile, someone who lived for attention. This wasn't a shadow affair. This was a ticking time bomb. When I pulled into the driveway, Ashley was outside. She was posing in front of the snow-covered hedges, holding a cup of coffee and making a pouty face at her phone. She was filming a TikTok. She stopped when she saw my car sputtering up the drive, her lip curled in disgust. "God, Simone," she called out, lowering her phone. "When are you going to get rid of that junk heap? It is bringing down the property value of the whole neighborhood. You know the neighbors are talking, right? They think the maid is parking in the driveway." I got out of the car, slamming the heavy door. "It is paid for, Ashley," I said, which is more than I can say for Dante's Rover. She laughed a harsh, barking sound. "Whatever, just move it around back. I am trying to get a shot for my winter aesthetic vlog, and your rust bucket is ruining the vibe." I walked toward her, digging into my purse for my house keys. As I reached her, I pretended to trip on a patch of ice. I stumbled forward, dropping my keys and my phone. "Oops," I muttered. Ashley sighed loudly. "You are so clumsy. It is embarrassing." She looked down to watch me scramble for my things. My phone had landed face up on the pavement. The screen was lit up. The photo I had taken at the jewelry store was front and center. Ashley's eyes went wide. She froze. Is that Dante?" she asked, her voice dropping an octave. I snatched the phone up quickly, acting like I was trying to hide it. "Nothing," I said too quickly. "It is nothing. Give me that." She grabbed my wrist, her nails digging into my skin. She pulled the phone closer, peering at the image. "That is Dante," she hissed. "And that is... Oh my God, is that Keisha Knight?" I looked down, refusing to meet her eyes. "I don't know who that is. I just found the receipt." Ashley stared at the photo, her face turned a blotchy red. "Keisha Knight," she spat. "That plastic fake witch. She steals all my brand deals. She copied my entire aesthetic last summer. I hate her." She looked closer at the ring on Keisha's finger. Is that a diamond?" $50,000, I whispered. "From our savings." Ashley let go of my wrist. She stood up straight, her chest heaving. She did not look at me with sympathy. She did not look at me with solidarity. She looked at the house where her brother was sleeping, and her eyes narrowed into slits. 50,000, she repeated. And he told me he couldn't afford to loan me 5 grand for my website relaunch. He told me the liquidity was tied up. She was not angry that he was cheating on me. She was angry that he was spending money on her rival instead of her. Don't tell him I know, I begged, playing the part of the scared wife. He will kill me, Ashley. Please. She looked at me with pure contempt. You are pathetic, Simone. You let him walk all over you. She turned and marched toward the house, her boots crunching in the snow. She did not go to comfort me. She went to get hers. I waited a beat, then followed quietly, slipping into the kitchen. I moved to my listening post in the pantry and put on my headphones. The audio from the living room picked up immediately. Ashley's voice was shrill and loud. You are a liar, Dante, a cheap lying snake. Ashley, keep your voice down, Dante hissed. What is your problem? The old lady is upstairs. My problem is… Keisha Knight, Ashley screamed. My problem is that you are buying 5-carat rocks for that trashy influencer, while your own sister is driving a 3-year-old BMW. There was a silence, then the sound of Dante stammering. How do you know about that? Simone dropped her phone, Ashley said. She is too stupid to realize what she has, but I am not. I saw the ring, Dante. I saw who it was for. Listen, Ash, it is not what you think, Dante pleaded. It is an investment. Keisha has connections. Cut the crap, Ashley snapped. I don't care who you sleep with, Dante, I really don't. Simone is a bore, I get it. But Keisha Knight, she is my enemy, and you are spending family money on her. So here is the deal, brother. You are going to cut me in. What? Dante asked, his voice incredulous. I want 10 grand, Ashley demanded. Cash. Today. Or I go upstairs and I tell Beatrice that her golden boy is blowing the inheritance before we even get it. And then I post that picture all over social media. Imagine what that will do to your reputation with the investors if they see you buying jewelry while claiming poverty. Ashley. You are crazy, Dante shouted, but there was fear in his voice. I don't have 10 grand liquid. Find it, she threatened. Sell your watch. I don't care. But I want my cut. Or Baby K gets dragged on the internet and you go down with her. I took off the headphones. A cold smile touched my lips. They were turning on each other. The greed was eating them alive from the inside out. Ashley didn't care about the betrayal, she just wanted her hush money. I walked out of the pantry and started preparing lunch. I chopped onions, my knife hitting the cutting board with a steady rhythmic thud. Let them fight. Let them bleed each other dry. I was just waiting for the main course. The atmosphere in the house shifted from tense to suffocating the moment the courier arrived. It was not a regular delivery. A man in a thick coat and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes knocked once, handed Dante a small black envelope, and walked away without a word. Dante opened it in the foyer. His hands were shaking so badly he tore the paper. Inside was a single photo of his luxury car parked outside his office, with the windshield smashed in, and a note written in jagged red marker. 48 hours. Or we take the rest of the collateral. Dante stared at the photo, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. The swagger was gone. The arrogance that usually radiated off him like heat waves had evaporated, leaving behind the scent of pure, unadulterated fear. He looked at the clock on the wall. 48 hours meant he had 2 days to come up with $500,000, or he was a dead man. He turned to me, his eyes wide and frantic. Where is the notary? He demanded. Get Beatrice. Get Jamal. We are doing this now. 10 minutes later, I was sitting on the sofa in the formal living room. I felt like a prisoner awaiting sentencing. Beatrice was pacing back and forth in front of the fireplace, wringing her hands and muttering prayers that sounded more like curses. Dante was standing over me, his shadow looming large. Jamal was leaning against the only exit, his arms crossed over his chest, his face set in a hard line. They had circled the wagons, and I was the enemy they had to break. Simone, listen to me. Beatrice began, her voice trembling with a mixture of panic and manipulation. We are in a crisis, a terrible crisis. The investments, the market took a downturn. We need liquidity immediately. She sat down next to me, grabbing my hand. Her skin was clammy. You are the only one who can help us. You are the primary caregiver on all of Nana's medical forms. You are the one the doctors talk to. You are the one who has to sign the power of attorney transfer. I pulled my hand away, tucking it into my lap. I cannot sign that, Beatrice, I whispered, keeping my eyes downcast. Nana is still alive. She has not consented to selling the buildings. Dante slammed his fist onto the coffee table, making the glass rattle. She is a vegetable, Simone. She does not know what day it is. She does not know her own name. We are trying to save her legacy. You are trying to save your own skin, I thought, but I kept my mouth shut. I let my lip quiver. I let a single tear roll down my cheek. But it feels wrong, I said, my voice breaking. It feels like stealing. Stealing! Beatrice shrieked, her mask of kindness slipping. We are her family. It is our money. We are just accessing it a little early. Do you want us to lose everything? Do you want to see your husband on the street? Dante grabbed my shoulder, his fingers digging into my collarbone. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could smell the sour scent of fierce sweat on him. Listen to me, he hissed. You are going to sign that paper. You are going to sign over full authority to me so I can liquidate the Bronzeville properties. If you do not. He let the threat hang in the air, heavy and violent. I looked at Jamal by the door. He shifted his weight, cracking his knuckles. He was not just there to watch. He was there to stop me from leaving. If I do not, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Dante released my shoulder and stood up, straightening his jacket. If you do not, then maybe the police get an anonymous tip about how you have been abusing Nana. Maybe they find those bruises on her arms. My blood ran cold. The bruises were from the IV lines at the hospital. But he would twist it. He would destroy me. And Ashley? Beatrice added, her eyes narrowing. She has footage, Simone. Hours of it. She can edit it to make you look like a monster. The internet will tear you apart. You will never work in a kitchen again. They had it all planned. The blackmail, the intimidation, the physical threat. They were not asking me. They were cornering me. I looked at the document on the table. It was the power of attorney transfer. It would give Dante the legal right to sell everything Nana owned, including the house we were standing in. If I signed it, he would sell the buildings, pay off the loan sharks, and kick me to the curb. But if I didn't sign it right now, they might hurt me. Or worse, they might hurt Nana. I took a deep breath, letting my hands shake visibly as I reached for the pen. I am scared, Dante, I sobbed. I do not want to go to jail. You won't go to jail, he said, his voice softening now that he saw me breaking. Just sign the paper, babe. We sell the assets, we pay the debts, and we are free. We can start over. Just you and me, liar. I held the pen over the paper. I hesitated. But the trust, I said, looking up at him with wide, innocent eyes. The lawyer? Mr. Sterling. He said the transition has to be formal. He said if we rush it, if it looks suspicious, the Board of Trustees will freeze the assets for investigation. He said Nana wanted dignity. Dante paused. What do you mean, dignity? I mean a ceremony, I said, wiping my eyes. A passing of the torch. Mr. Sterling said that for the $10 million trust to release without an audit, we need to hold a formal event. A gathering of witnesses. We need to announce the transition of power in front of the community. To show that Nana is passing the legacy to you. Beatrice stopped pacing. 10 million, she whispered. We cannot risk an audit. If they audit us, they will see the accounts are empty. We have to do what the lawyer says, I insisted. We have to make it look legitimate, Dante. We have to make it look like a celebration. Like Nana is honoring you. Dante ran a hand through his hair. A party. You want me to throw a party while I have a gun to my head? Not a party, I corrected. A coronation. Think about it, Dante, all the investors. The Carters, the Sterlings, everyone who doubted you. They will see you taking control of the estate. They will see you as the heir to the Rose Roots empire. It will restore your reputation instantly. I saw the vanity flare in his eyes. He imagined it. He imagined standing on a stage, being applauded, being envied. He imagined the power. "We can do it tomorrow night," I said, pressing my advantage. "At the Peninsula Hotel. I can organize it. I know the catering manager. We get everyone there. You give a speech. I sign the papers on stage in front of everyone. The lawyer witnesses it. The trust unlocks. And you pay the debt." Dante looked at Beatrice. She nodded slowly. A public signing, she mused. It would look very official. It would shut down any rumors, and it would look elegant. Dante looked back at me. "Can you pull this off in 24 hours? "I am a chef," I said, sitting up straighter. "I work under pressure for a living. I can do it. But you have to promise me one thing." "What?" "You have to let me plan it. No Ashley, no interference. I want this to be perfect for Nana. I want her to go out in glory." Dante smiled. It was the smile of a shark that thinks it has cornered a seal. "Fine. You plan the party. But if you screw this up, Simone, if that money does not release—" I picked up the pen and signed the paper. Not the power of attorney. I signed a blank sheet of paper he had placed underneath it as a test. "I won't screw it up, I promised. I am going to give you the night you deserve." The tension in the room broke. Dante grabbed the paper, checking the signature. He did not notice it was just a scrap sheet. He was too high on the victory. "Get to work," he said, checking his watch. "You have 24 hours to save this family." I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. I walked past Jamal, who stepped aside to let me pass. I walked past Beatrice, who was already on her phone bragging to a friend about the exclusive gala her son was hosting. I walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, breathing hard. They had bought it. Their greed was so blinding they had walked right into the trap. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I opened the encrypted messaging app and typed a text to Arthur Vance. "The fish has bitten. Prepare the net." I hit send. Then I opened my contact list and scrolled to the catering manager at the Peninsula. I was going to order the most expensive champagne they had. After all, a celebration was in order, just not the one they were expecting. The night before the gala, I drove back to the safe house in Pilsen with my heart in my throat. The streets of Chicago were slick with black ice, reflecting the streetlights like shattered glass. I had spent the last 24 hours playing the role of the dutiful, terrified wife, organizing catering, arranging flowers, and soothing Dante's manic episodes. But now I needed to see the general of this army. I needed to see Nana Rose. When I unlocked the door to my small apartment, I expected to find her resting in the bed I had set up for her, perhaps conserving her strength for the ordeal ahead. Instead, I stopped dead in the hallway. The wheelchair we had used to transport her out of the hospital sat in the corner, folded up and gathering dust. And standing in the center of the living room, bathed in the warm light of a floor lamp, was Rose. She was not the frail, trembling woman I had cleaned up after for 2 years. She was standing tall, her spine straight, her chin lifted. She had washed the gray dullness from her skin, and her hair was no longer a messy bun, but braided into an intricate crown that wrapped around her head like a coronet of silver and steel. But it was the dress that took my breath away. It hung on her frame, not like clothing, but like armor. It was a deep, blood-red silk gown, floor-length, with long sleeves, and a neckline that spoke of elegance and power. It was the kind of red that commands attention, the kind of red that says, "I am here, and I am dangerous." She turned to the mirror, smoothing the fabric over her hips. She caught my reflection in the glass and smiled. It was not a grandmotherly smile. It was the smile of a woman who had built an empire from nothing and was about to take it back. "Do I look like a victim to you, Simone?" she asked, her voice strong and clear. "You look like a queen," I whispered, dropping my keys on the table. "Good," she said, applying a coat of lipstick that matched the dress perfectly. Because tomorrow night I am not going to be the poor, senile old lady they locked in the attic. I am going to be the wrath of God. She walked over to me, her steps steady. The shuffle was gone. The weakness was gone. She had been conserving her energy for years, storing it up like a battery, waiting for this exact moment to discharge. In the kitchen, Arthur Vance was sitting at my small table, which was now covered in files and laptops. He was on the phone, his voice low and serious. He did not look up when I entered, just held up a hand to signal he needed a moment. I listened as he spoke. Yes, Agent Miller. We have the wire transfers. We have the forged deeds. The affidavit from the wife is secured. We are prepared to hand over the physical evidence tomorrow night. Yes. The entire family will be present. You can execute the warrant then. He hung up and looked at me, removing his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. That was the FBI, he said calmly. The FBI. I repeated, my knees feeling weak. Dante did not just steal from his friends, Vance explained. He moved money across state lines. He defrauded a federal housing grant program to fund his crypto investments. This isn't just a lawsuit anymore, Simone. This is a federal indictment. And I spoke with the Bureau of Elder Justice. He continued, tapping a separate file. They are very interested in the conditions you found Rose in. The lack of heat, the malnutrition, the isolation. Beatrice and Dante are looking at mandatory minimums for elder abuse and neglect. I looked at Nana Rose. She was adjusting a diamond brooch on her shoulder. She knew. She knew exactly what was coming. They wanted to treat me like a prisoner, she said softly. So I will make sure they die in a cage. Vance handed me a tablet. Now for your part, Simone. The guest list. I looked at the screen. Dante had given me a list of about 50 people. His investors, his friends, who were really just people he wanted to impress. The people who would clap while he stole his grandmother's legacy. But Vance had opened the admin panel for the event invitations. We are going to expand the list, he said. I started typing. I added the names of the people Dante and Ashley had mocked for years. I invited the deacon from the church whose retirement fund Dante had stolen. I invited the contractors Dante had stiffed on the renovation work. I invited the kitchen staff from my restaurant, the ones Ashley had called the help to their faces. Then I added the press, not the lifestyle bloggers Ashley coveted. I invited the investigative reporters from the Tribune. I invited the crime beat writers. I invited the people who destroyed reputations for a living. I hit send. Hundreds of digital invitations flew out into the cyber ether, landing in inboxes across the city. The trap is set, Vance said, closing the laptop. Go home, Simone. Get some rest. You have a performance to give. I drove back to the Greystone mansion, feeling like I was driving into the mouth of a beast. The house was blazing with lights when I pulled up. Dante was in a frenzy. He was in the living room shouting at a tailor who was trying to hem his tuxedo pants. Beatrice was drinking wine straight from the bottle, pacing back and forth, muttering about centerpieces. Ashley was trying on dresses in the hallway, discarding them in a pile on the floor, when they did not look expensive enough. They were manic. They were high on the anticipation of the money. They thought tomorrow was their coronation. Dante saw me come in. Did you confirm the flowers? He barked. Yes, I said, keeping my head down. White lilies. Just like you wanted. Good. And the lawyer? Sterling. Is he coming? He will be there, I promised. He is bringing the papers. Dante grinned. It was a tight skull-like grin. Perfect. Tomorrow night we are free. He did not know how right he was. I went upstairs to the master bedroom. I needed to shower to wash off the smell of the safe house before Dante noticed. My phone was in my pocket, set to silent. But as I walked into the bathroom, it buzzed against my hip. It was not a text for me. It was a notification that Dante's phone, which he had left charging on the nightstand, had received a message. I glanced at the screen. It was from an unknown number. I picked it up. The message was short. See you in hell, nephew. My heart stopped. It was Nana. She had sent it from a burner phone. Downstairs, I heard a crash. Then a scream. I ran to the landing. Dante was standing in the foyer staring at his Apple Watch, which was synced to his phone. His face was the color of old ash. He had dropped his glass of whiskey and it had shattered on the marble floor. "Who is it?" Beatrice screamed, running to him. "Who is texting you?" "It is him," Dante whispered, his voice trembling so hard I could barely hear him. "It is the loan shark, the guy from the south side. He said he is going to see me in hell. He thinks they are going to kill him." Beatrice gasped, clutching her pearls. "They know," Dante said, looking around the room wildly. "They know I am stalling." He looked up at me, his eyes bulging with terror. "We have to do this tomorrow," he shouted at me. "We have to get that money released. If we do not sign those papers by midnight, they are going to kill me, Simone. They are coming for us." He did not suspect Nana. He did not suspect the woman he had left to freeze in the attic. His guilt and his fear had blinded him. He thought the devil was chasing him. I looked down at him from the top of the stairs. "Do not worry, Dante," I said, my voice steady and soothing. "The party is all set. Tomorrow night you get exactly what is coming to you." He nodded, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Good. Good. Just make sure it is perfect." I walked back into the bedroom and closed the door. I looked at the red lace underwear I had retrieved from the dishwasher earlier. I tucked it into the pocket of the dress I was planning to wear tomorrow. Oh, it was going to be perfect. It was going to be the most perfect night of his life. Right up until the moment the lights went out. The grand ballroom at the Peninsula Hotel was a cathedral of gold leaf and crystal chandeliers, a venue designed to make even the wealthiest guests feel underdressed. It smelled of white lilies and expensive perfume, a scent that barely masked the underlying odor of desperation radiating from my husband. Dante had spared no expense for his coronation. He had ordered cases of Dom Perignon imported caviar and a jazz band that was currently playing a soft, innocuous tune in the corner. He had paid for the deposit with his Black American Express card, the symbol of his status. He did not know that at 8 o'clock this morning I had called the bank and reported the card stolen. I had canceled the account entirely. The hotel had run a pre-authorization yesterday which had cleared, but when they tried to run the final bill of over $100,000 at the end of the night, the card was going to decline so hard it would probably break the machine. I watched him from the shadows near the kitchen entrance. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a glove, the black silk lapels catching the light. He was laughing with Mr. Sterling, holding a glass of champagne with a steady hand, but I could see the sweat beading on his upper lip. He was terrified. He kept glancing at the exits as if he expected the loan sharks to burst in at any moment. He thought this party was his shield. He thought that if he looked rich enough and powerful enough, the wolves would back off. Ashley was in her element. She was wearing a silver sequined gown that dipped low in the back, and she was spinning in the center of the dance floor, holding her phone up high. The ring light attached to her case cast a ghostly halo around her face. She was live streaming to her followers, narrating the evening with breathless excitement. "Hey guys," she chirped into the microphone. "We are here at the Rose Legacy Gala. It is so emotional, you guys. We are celebrating the life of my grandmother, Nana Rose, who is, well, she is transitioning tonight. We are announcing the new foundation my brother is starting in her honor. Look at this venue. Hashtag Black Excellence, #Legacy, #Rich Kids of Chicago." She spun the camera around to show off the room. She did not pan over the table in the back where the kitchen staff from my restaurant were sitting, looking uncomfortable in their Sunday best. She did not show the contractors Dante had stiffed who were standing near the bar drinking the expensive scotch they had paid for with their unpaid labor. She only showed the glitter. I stepped out of the shadows. I was not wearing a gown. I was wearing a gray wool dress that I had bought at a thrift store 5 years ago. It was frayed at the hem and slightly faded. It was the dress I had worn on the day I met Dante before I became his chef, his maid, and his scapegoat. I wore no jewelry, not even my wedding ring. I had left that on the nightstand next to the divorce papers I had printed out earlier. I walked toward the center of the room. Heads turned. Whispers started. In a sea of silk and velvet, I looked like a stain. Beatrice intercepted me before I could reach the main table. She was wearing a gold dress that looked like it was made of molten metal and a diamond necklace that I recognized from Nana's old insurance appraisals. She had stolen it from the safe before I changed the lock. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my flesh. "What are you wearing?" she hissed, her smile fixed in place for the benefit of the guests watching us. "You look like a beggar. Go upstairs and change immediately. You are embarrassing us." I pulled my arm away. "I am wearing what I can afford, Beatrice," I said, my voice loud enough to carry to the nearby tables. Since Dante emptied our bank accounts, I did not have $5,000 for a dress. Beatrice's eyes widened in panic. "Keep your voice down," she whispered furiously. "You look like the help. Actually, the help is dressed better than you. Get out of my sight. Go stand in the back with the waiters where you belong." I did as she asked. I walked to the back of the room, but I did not hide. I stood next to the reporter from the Chicago Tribune who was posing as a caterer. I nodded to him. He tapped his pocket where his recorder was running. The music faded and the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Dante walked up to the podium. He looked handsome. He looked commanding. He looked like a man who owned the world. He gripped the microphone with both hands. He bowed his head for a moment, composing his face into a mask of tragic sorrow. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "Tonight is a difficult night for our family. As many of you know, our matriarch, the legendary Nana Rose, is in her final hours. She is at home, surrounded by peace and love, but her spirit is here with us." He paused to wipe a fake tear from his eye. Beatrice let out a sob from the front row. Ashley held up her phone, zooming in on his face. "Nana Rose was a pioneer," Dante continued, his voice rising. "She built an empire from nothing. She taught me everything I know about business, about integrity, about family. And in her final lucid moments, she made a request. She asked me to take up her mantle. She asked me to lead the Rose Roots estate into the future." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the forged documents. He waved them in the air. "These papers represent her trust in me. They represent a transfer of stewardship. I am humbled to accept this responsibility. I promise to use these assets to build a legacy that would make her proud, to invest in our community, to grow the wealth she created." He was lying to a room full of people he had stolen from. He was holding up a crime and calling it a legacy. "So tonight," he said, raising his glass, "we do not mourn. We celebrate. We celebrate the transition of power. We celebrate the future. To Nana Rose." "To Nana Rose," the crowd murmured, raising their glasses. Dante smiled. He reached for the pen that was sitting on the podium, ready to sign the document that would give him the authority to sell the buildings and pay off the men who wanted to kill him. He uncapped the pen. He touched the tip to the paper. And then the world went black. Every light in the ballroom cut out instantly. The chandeliers went dark. The stage lights died. The room was plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a glass and it shattered. "Hey!" Dante's voice came from the stage, sounding small and frightened in the dark. "What is going on? Turn the lights back on." There was a crackle of static from the speakers, a low hum that vibrated in the floorboards. Then a voice boomed through the room. It was not Dante's voice. It was not the smooth, polished voice of a politician. It was a voice of gravel and iron. A voice that sounded like it had been dragged through hell and came back with a souvenir. "Who says I am dead?" the voice thundered. Ashley screamed. I saw the light of her phone screen jerking wildly in the dark. The voice spoke again, louder this time, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "You want my legacy, Dante? You want to sign my name?" Silence fell over the room, heavy and terrified. Then a single spotlight snapped on. It did not hit the stage. It hit the massive double doors at the back of the ballroom. The doors swung open with a groan. And there she was, The spotlight caught the swirling dust motes in the air, creating a path of light that stretched from the double doors directly to the stage. At the end of that path stood Nana Rose. She was not the frail ghost Dante had described. She was not the dying woman Beatrice had mourned. She was a force of nature wrapped in blood-red silk. She stood tall, leaning lightly on a gold-headed cane that gleamed under the light. Her gray hair was braided into a crown, and she wore diamonds that were not stolen but earned. Behind her, flanked like royal guards, stood Arthur Vance in his sharp suit, and 4 men who looked like they were carved out of granite. They wore dark suits and earpieces. They were not hotel security. They were private protection. The silence in the room shattered. A collective gasp swept through the crowd like a physical wave. Ashley, who had been holding her phone up to capture the drama, dropped it. It clattered to the floor, the screen cracking, but the live stream kept running, broadcasting her terror to the world. Beatrice, sitting in the front row, let out a strangled sound. It was a high, thin whine like a kettle boiling over. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she slumped sideways, sliding out of her chair and hitting the floor with a dull thud. No one moved to help her. They were too busy staring at the dead woman walking. Dante stood on the stage, his hands still hovering over the paper. The pen slipped from his fingers and rolled off the podium. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. He looked like he was seeing his own executioner. Nana. He whispered the word barely audible over the hum of the ventilation system. Nana, you are supposed to be dead. Nana finished for him, her voice carrying to the back of the room without a microphone. That is what you told them, isn't it, Dante? That I was transitioning, that I was fading away. She began to walk down the aisle. Her steps were slow but deliberate. Every click of her cane on the marble floor was a gavel strike. The crowd parted for her, stepping back in awe and fear. I am not fading, she announced, her voice rising. I am burning bright, and I am here to burn you down. She reached the stage. The stairs were steep, but she did not falter. One of the guards stepped forward to offer an arm, but she waved him away. She climbed the steps herself, one by one, her eyes never leaving Dante's face. When she reached the podium, Dante stumbled back, tripping over his own feet. He looked small next to her. He looked like a child caught playing with fire. Nana grabbed the microphone from the stand. She looked out at the sea of faces, the investors, the friends, the enemies. You all came here for a legacy, she said. You came to see what I left behind. You want to know what the Rose Roots empire is worth. She paused, letting the tension build. Well, let me show you. She pointed her cane at the massive projection screen behind the stage. The screen, which had been displaying a tasteful photo of a younger Rose, flickered. The image changed. It was a video. But it was not a tribute. The footage was grainy, shot from a low angle. It showed Ashley standing in Nana's attic room. She was holding a bowl of oatmeal, and she was shouting, "Eat it, you disgusting old hag!" Ashley's voice screeched from the speakers, distorted but unmistakable. You are making a mess. Just die already so we can sell this dump. The crowd gasped. Ashley, who was on her knees trying to retrieve her broken phone, froze. Her face on the screen was twisted in ugly rage, a stark contrast to the filtered perfection she presented online. The video cut. New footage appeared. This time it was Dante. He was in the kitchen holding a glass of whiskey. He was talking to Jamal. The old lady is tough, Dante said on the screen, his voice slurred. But once we cut the heat, nature will take its course. Hypothermia is painless, right? It is a mercy. A woman in the audience screamed. Mr. Sterling stood up, his face purple with rage. You monster! He shouted, pointing at Dante. You told me she was in a facility. You told me she was safe. The video cut again. Now it was Beatrice. She was in Nana's room, rifling through the jewelry box. Where are the diamonds? She muttered, throwing clothes on the floor. That selfish witch. She probably swallowed them just to spite me. The video ended. The screen went black. The ballroom was silent, but it was a heavy, dangerous silence, the kind of silence that comes before a riot. Nana Rose lowered the microphone. She looked at Dante, who was shaking so hard he could barely stand. "That is your legacy, Dante," she said softly. "Greed, cruelty, and stupidity. You thought I was senile. You thought I was weak. But I was just watching. I was writing down every sin." Dante fell to his knees. "Nana, please," he sobbed, reaching for the hem of her dress. "I am sorry. I was desperate. They were going to kill me. They still might," Nana said coldly, stepping back out of his reach. "But first, you have to answer to the law." She turned to the side of the stage. "Come on out, Sheriff," she called. From the shadows of the wings, a figure emerged. He was wearing a beige uniform with a gold star on his chest. It was the sheriff of Cook County, and behind him were 4 uniformed officers. They walked onto the stage, their boots heavy on the wood. They did not look at Nana. They looked at Dante. "Dante Williams," the sheriff said, his voice booming. "You are under arrest." For what? Dante screamed, scrambling backward until he hit the back wall of the stage. "I didn't do anything. It is a misunderstanding for embezzlement, wire fraud, elder abuse, and attempted murder." The sheriff listed, ticking them off on his fingers. "And that is just the start. We have the forensic accounting from your laptop. We have the testimony from your wife. And we have the recording of you planning a homicide." 2 officers grabbed Dante by the arms. He fought them, kicking and screaming like a toddler. They dragged him to the front of the stage and slammed him down, handcuffing him in front of the people he had tried to impress. Ashley tried to run. She scrambled up from the floor, clutching her broken phone, and made a break for the side exit. But the doors opened before she could reach them. A woman in a sharp business suit stepped in, blocking her path. She held up a badge. "FBI," she said. "Ashley Williams. We need to have a talk about your online fundraising for a charity that doesn't exist." Ashley collapsed, wailing. Beatrice was still on the floor, unconscious or pretending to be. Jamal was trying to blend into the curtains, but a security guard had him by the collar. Nana Rose stood alone at the podium, watching her family be dismantled. She did not look happy. She looked tired, but she looked free. She looked at me standing in the back of the room. Our eyes met. She nodded once. A small, almost imperceptible dip of her chin. It was done. The war was over, and the Queen was still standing. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. Dante was pressed cheek first against the hardwood stage, his tuxedo jacket bunched up around his shoulders, his expensive shoes scuffing the floor as he thrashed. He was not screaming anymore. He was making a low, animalistic noise of pure disbelief. He could not process that the world he thought he ruled had just collapsed on top of him. The sheriff hauled him up by his collar, forcing him to face the audience he had tried to swindle. "Dante Williams, you are under arrest for 18 counts of wire fraud, 12 counts of embezzlement, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree. We have the bank records showing the unauthorized transfer of $5 million from the Southside Community Housing Grant into your personal offshore accounts. And we have the recording of you instructing your wife to let your grandmother die of hypothermia to expedite a real estate sale." The crowd gasped. The investors who had been drinking Dante's champagne 5 minutes ago recoiled as if he were contagious. Mr. Sterling looked like he was going to be sick. The kitchen staff in the back stood up and started clapping, a slow, rhythmic applause that grew louder and louder until it filled the room. Dante's eyes darted around the room wildly until they landed on me. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and desperate pleading. "Simone," he choked out, spittle flying from his lips. "Simone, tell them. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. You are my wife. You cannot testify against me. Spousal privilege." Arthur Vance stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Spousal privilege does not apply when the spouse is the victim of the crime, Dante. And it certainly does not apply when the wife is the one who handed over the evidence." Dante stared at me, and for the first time he saw me. Not the sous chef, not the maid, not the doormat. He saw the woman who had just ended him. "You," he whispered. "You did this." I did not say a word. I just watched. To the left of the stage, Ashley was putting on a show of her own. The FBI agent had cornered her against the emergency exit, but Ashley was not going quietly. She was fighting like a trapped rat. She saw the cell phones pointed at her, hundreds of them, recording her humiliation, and she snapped. "It was not me," she shrieked. Her face twisted into an ugly snarl that no filter could fix. "It was Jamal. It was my husband. He told me the charity was legit. He told me we were taking a cut for management fees. I am a victim here." She turned on Jamal, who was being held by two security guards near the curtain. "You loser," she screamed at him, throwing her Chanel clutch at his head. "You promised me we were going to be rich. You said your brother was a genius. You dragged me into this. I am an influencer. I have a brand. You have ruined my brand." She lunged at him, her nails aiming for his face, but the agent caught her arm. Ashley twisted toward the crowd, realizing too late that her outburst was being live-streamed to the very followers she had curated so carefully. "Stop recording," she yelled, batting at a woman's phone. "Stop it. Do you know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are," someone in the crowd shouted back. "You are the girl who eats moldy oatmeal while her grandmother freezes." Cancelled. Ashley collapsed to the floor, weeping not for her crimes, but for her lost verification checkmark. Her career was dead. The internet does not forgive elder abuse, and it certainly does not forgive fakes. Beatrice had finally been revived by a paramedic. She was sitting up groggily, blinking in the harsh light of the spot. She looked from Dante in handcuffs to Ashley in custody to Nana Rose standing like a titan on the stage. "Mother," she croaked, reaching out a shaking hand. "Mother, please, we made mistakes, but we are family. We can fix this. Just tell them to let Dante go. We will pay it back." Nana Rose looked down at her daughter. Her expression was not angry. It was filled with a profound and terrible pity. "You cannot pay back a soul," Beatrice Nana said, her voice amplified by the silence of the room. "You raised a thief and you married a coward, and you watched me rot in that attic for 2 years because you wanted my diamonds more than you wanted my love. You are no family of mine." Arthur Vance walked to the center of the stage. He held up a thick leather-bound document. It was the only prop that mattered tonight. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vance announced, his voice booming, "there seems to be some confusion regarding the estate of Rose Roots, Inc. Let me clarify." He opened the folder. 1 hour ago, in the presence of a federal notary and 3 witnesses, Ms. Rose executed a transfer of trust and a living deed. This document revokes all previous wills, all powers of attorney, and all beneficiary designations previously held by Dante Williams or Beatrice Williams. Dante stopped struggling. He hung limp in the sheriff's grip, listening to his life evaporate. As of tonight, Vance continued turning the page with a flourish. The sole owner of the Rose Roots commercial portfolio, the intellectual property rights, and the historic Greystone mansion in Bronzeville is Ms. Simone Williams. The room erupted. Cheers, whistles, and applause shook the walls. I stood frozen in the back, my heart hammering. $25 million. The buildings, the business, the house. It was all mine. But Vance was not done. "Furthermore," he said, looking directly at Beatrice and Jamal, "since the ownership of the residence has transferred effective immediately, you are all trespassing. The locks will be changed in 1 hour. Anything left inside will be donated to the Salvation Army. You are evicted." Beatrice let out a wail of despair that sounded like a dying animal. Jamal slumped against the wall, defeated. The sheriff began to drag Dante away. "Wait!" Dante shouted, digging his heels into the floor. "Wait! Simone! Simone, please!" He locked eyes with me. "Babe, listen. We have $25 million now. We can beat this. I can get a good lawyer. We can go to Paris like you always wanted. Just tell them to stop. I am your husband. I love you." The audacity of it took my breath away. Even now in cuffs, he thought he could charm me. He thought he could use me. I walked forward, The crowd parted for me, creating a path straight to the prisoner. I walked slowly, my heels clicking on the marble, the sound echoing like a ticking clock. I stopped inches from him, stopped inches. He smelled of sweat and fear and the ruin of his own making. He looked at me with hope, that pathetic, arrogant hope that I was still the woman who would fix his messes. "Simone," he whispered, leaning toward me. "Baby, help me." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had left me to freeze. The man who had bought a ring for another woman with my money. The man who had called me stupid and slow and worthless. I raised my left hand. The gold band on my finger felt heavy. It felt like a shackle. I slid it off. It came away easily, as if my finger had shrunk, or the ring had expanded, rejecting the bond it represented. I held it up, catching the light. It was a simple band. Cheap. He had bought it at a pawn shop and told me it was vintage. "I love you," Dante said, again desperate. I looked at the ring. Then I looked at him. I tossed the ring. It hit him square in the chest, bouncing off his tuxedo lapel and clattering onto the floor near his feet. "This is too cheap," I said, my voice steady and cold enough to freeze hell over. "It does not suit me." I turned my back on him. "Get him out of here," Nana Rose commanded from the stage. As they dragged him away, screaming my name, I walked toward the stage. I walked toward the woman who had saved me and the future I had earned. I did not look back. Not even once. The Chicago winter is brutal. But inside the walls of my new restaurant, the air is warm and smells of rosemary, brown butter, and triumph. We are located in the heart of Bronzeville, on the ground floor of the historic building that started the Rose Roots Empire. I named the place Legacy. It is fitting because that is exactly what we reclaimed from the ashes of my husband's greed. Tonight is the grand opening. The dining room is packed. The tables are made of reclaimed oak, and the lighting is soft and golden, bouncing off the exposed brick walls that I spent months restoring. There is a line stretching down the block, people waiting in the snow, just to get a taste of the food that Ashley once called heavy and greasy. I am standing at the pass, wiping a smudge off a plate of braised short ribs. It is the same recipe I served at that disastrous dinner party a year ago. The same dish Ashley mocked. Now it is our signature item, and food critics from the Tribune are calling it a revelation. I pause for a moment, listening to the hum of the kitchen, the clatter of pans, and the shouts of my staff. It is the music of a life I built with my own two hands. It is hard to believe that only 12 months have passed since the night the lights went out at the Peninsula Hotel. The fallout from that evening was swift and absolute. Dante is currently celebrating his first anniversary as inmate number 749 at the Stateville Correctional Center. The judge was not lenient. The federal charges for wire fraud and embezzlement carried a heavy sentence, but it was the attempted murder charge regarding Nana that really sealed his fate. He took a plea deal to avoid life in prison, but he will still be behind bars for at least 10 years. I visited him once just to finalize the divorce papers. He looked small in his orange jumpsuit, his arrogance stripped away, leaving only a hollow, bitter man who blamed everyone but himself. I signed the papers, left my ring on the metal table, and walked out without saying goodbye. Ashley did not fare much better. The internet is a cruel place, and it does not forgive. After the video of her screaming at Nana went viral, she lost everything. Her brand deals evaporated overnight. Her followers turned into a mob. Jamal divorced her 3 months later, claiming he had been misled by her ambition, which was laughable considering his own role in the scheme. Last I heard, she was working as a cashier at a discount grocery store in the suburbs. I imagine it is hard to maintain a luxury aesthetic when you are scanning coupons for the people you used to look down on. And then there is Beatrice. My former mother-in-law lives in a subsidized senior housing complex on the far south side. The church community she prided herself on leading turned their backs on her completely. In our community, we respect our elders, and what she did to her own mother was unforgivable. She spends her days alone, sitting on a plastic chair in a small apartment with thin walls. She has no jewelry left, no fine linens, and no legacy. She is exactly where she tried to put Nana. I pick up the plate and hand it to a server. Service table 4, I call out, my voice strong and clear. The kitchen doors swing open and Arthur Vance walks in. He looks out of place amidst the steam and the chef's coats in his tailored suit, but he is smiling. "Full house, Simone," he says, leaning against the counter. "I just saw the mayor seated at the corner booth. He wants to meet the owner." "I will be out in a minute," I say, wiping my hands on my apron. "Where is she?" Vance points toward the private dining area on the mezzanine level. "Best seat in the house, just like you ordered." I leave the kitchen in the capable hands of my sous chef and make my way up the spiral staircase. The mezzanine overlooks the main dining floor, offering a view of the entire operation. Sitting there in a velvet armchair holding court like the queen she is, sits Nana Rose. She is 86 now, but she looks 10 years younger than she did the day I found her in the attic. Her hair is silver and braided into a crown. She is wearing a gold dress that shimmers under the lights, and she is laughing with a group of old friends from the neighborhood. When she sees me approaching, her face lights up. She taps her cane on the floor, signaling for attention. "Here she is," Nana announces, her voice cutting through the chatter. "The woman of the hour." I walk over and kiss her cheek. She smells of lavender and expensive perfume. "Are you happy, Nana?" I ask. She looks down at the bustling restaurant, at the diverse crowd enjoying the food, at the life we have breathed back into her building. "I am more than happy," she says. "I am vindicated. We took the poison they tried to feed us, and we turned it into a feast." She reaches for her cane and stands up. Her movements are slower now, but she still has that steel in her spine. "Come with me," she says. We walk out onto the private balcony that overlooks the Chicago skyline. The night air is crisp and cold, but this time it does not feel dangerous. It feels fresh. The city lights are twinkling below us, a sea of diamonds that stretch out to the horizon. Nana leans against the railing, looking out at the city she conquered twice. Once with her hair products, and now with her justice. "You know," she says softly without looking at me, "when I gave you that key, I was not sure if you could do it. I knew you were kind, Simone, but I did not know if you were tough." I stand beside her, wrapping my chef's coat tighter around me. I was not tough, I admit. I was terrified. That is the same thing Nana says, turning to face me. Being tough isn't about not being scared. It is about being terrified and doing it anyway. "You saved my life, Simone, but more importantly, you saved my name. You reminded them who Rose Roots really is." She reaches into her purse and pulls out a small velvet box. She hands it to me. "Open it," she commands. I open the box. Inside is a simple, elegant gold pin. It is shaped like a rose, but the petals are made of small rubies. "It belonged to my mother," Nana says. "I wore it when I signed my first business contract in 1982. I want you to have it." I touch the cold metal, tears pricking my eyes. "Nana, I cannot take this." "You earned it," she insists, taking the pin and fastening it to the lapel of my white chef's coat. "It looks good on you. It matches the fire in your eyes." She steps back and looks me up and down, nodding with satisfaction. "You did good, sous chef," she says, a teasing smile playing on her lips. I look down at the pin, then back up at her. I straighten my spine, lifting my chin, just the way she taught me. "No, Nana," I correct her, my voice steady and proud. "It is executive chef." Nana Rose throws her head back and laughs, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that echoes into the night. She raises her glass of champagne toward the city lights. To the executive chef she toasts, and to the women who clean up the mess. I raise my own glass. To the women who own the building, I reply. We clink our glasses, the crystal singing a clear high note in the cold air. Below us, the city moves on, unaware of the war we fought and the victory we won. But up here on the balcony, with the wind in our faces and the future at our feet, we know. We survived the winter, and now we are the ones bringing the heat. This story teaches us never to mistake silence for weakness. Nana Rose and Simone were dismissed as irrelevant help and a senile burden, yet they held the true power all along. The family's downfall stemmed entirely from their arrogance in underestimating those they abused. It reminds us that true strength lies in integrity and patience, not in flashy displays of stolen wealth. Ultimately, character always outlasts greed. The most satisfying victories belong to those who wait, watch, and strike when the time is right, turning their pain into a legacy of triumph. If you enjoyed seeing the underdog take back everything, hit like and subscribe and tell us in the comments, have you ever had to prove everyone wrong?